I woke up to the stinging scent of antiseptic and the hum of machines, expecting a hug after 6 months in the dark. Instead, my only son refused to look me in the eye. "We gave your house to her parents," he muttered, shifting his weight. "I thought you were going to die." Just like that. 20 years of hard work vanished. I was a stranger in the life I had built with my own hands. My name is Marjorie Caldwell, and for 58 years, I have prided myself on standing on my own 2 feet in the quiet hills of Cedar Hollow, Pennsylvania. I never asked for a handout. I never left a bill unpaid. I lived by a code of discipline and self-reliance that I thought I had passed down to my son. But lying in that hospital bed, the air thick with the chemical sting of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of the monitor next to my head, I felt reduced to nothing more than a logistical problem to be solved. My body felt heavy, like it was filled with wet sand. The stroke had taken the strength from my limbs and the sharpness from my tongue, but it had not touched the core of who I was. I blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. The only thing keeping me tethered to the world was the image of my back porch. I could see the old maple tree I had planted 20 years ago, its leaves turning that deep, burning red in the autumn sun. I needed to get back there. I needed to sit on my swing and drink my black coffee. Then the heavy door swung open. It was not a doctor. It was Ethan, my only son. He walked in with his shoulders hunched, looking at the beige linoleum floor rather than at me. Lauren, his wife, followed him. She did not come to the bedside. She stood with her back against the closed door, arms crossed over her chest, watching the room like a prison guard doing a head count. Ethan did not hug me. He did not take my hand. He stood at the foot of the bed, shifting his weight from one foot to the other as if the floor were hot. "Mom," Ethan started, his voice cracking. He looked terrible, pale and sweaty. I didn't think you were going to make it. The doctors said it was bad. They said you might not wake up." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry as dust. I managed a small noise, urging him to go on. "While you were in the coma." He paused, swallowing hard. "I let Lauren's parents move into the house. I gave them the keys. I told them they could have it." The words hit me harder than the stroke had. I looked at Lauren. Her expression was flat, unreadable. "We thought you were going to die, Marjorie," Lauren said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "My parents lost their place. They needed a home. Since you're awake now, you should probably look into assisted living or a small apartment. You can't go back there. They're settled in." I should have screamed. A younger, more foolish version of me might have tried to sit up and yell until the nurses came running, but I did not. I lay perfectly still. The silence in the room stretched out, heavy and suffocating. I saw Ethan glance up at me, and for the first time, he looked truly afraid. He was expecting rage. He was expecting tears. Instead, he got the cold, hard stare of a woman who suddenly realized she was looking at a stranger wearing her son's face. My mind, which they assumed was broken, was spinning with a clarity that frightened me. That house was mine. The deed was in my name. I had paid the mortgage every single month for 2 decades. I had never signed a power of attorney. I had never authorized anyone to make decisions about my property. How did he give it to them? He had no legal right, unless he had manufactured one. Ethan opened his mouth to say something else, to offer some pathetic excuse. But I closed my eyes. I was done listening to him. "Leave," I croaked out. It was a single, garbled word, but the command was unmistakable. Lauren grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him out of the room. As soon as the latch clicked, I pressed the call button for the nurse. When the young woman in blue scrubs appeared, I did not ask for water. I did not ask for pain medication. Social worker, I whispered, forcing my tongue to shape the sounds. Not family. Get social worker. The nurse looked confused but nodded. I stared up at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots to keep my rage from boiling over. They thought I was weak. They thought I was a discardable piece of the past. They were wrong. I did not need to make a scene. I did not need to shout. I just needed to take back what was mine. They had walked into a house they did not own, but they had no idea they had just locked themselves inside a trap. Lying in that hospital bed gave me plenty of time to stare at the ceiling and retrace the steps that led me here. My mind kept drifting back to the days before the stroke, back to the years when I was just a payroll clerk at Redwood Claims and Benefits. I worked 40 hours a week processing insurance forms, and then I picked up evening shifts at the diner down on 4th Street just to make sure the savings account never dipped below $1,000. I was divorced, tired, and determined. I bought that small brick house in Cedar Hollow with money that smelled like diner grease and printer toner. It was not a palace. It was a foreclosure that needed a new roof and serious plumbing work. But it was mine. I remembered the weekend I retiled the kitchen floor by myself. My knees were bruised black and blue, and my hands were so dry they cracked. But when I stood back and looked at those clean, white tiles, I felt like a queen. I planted the maple tree in the backyard the following spring. It was just a twig then, barely up to my waist. I told myself that by the time it was tall enough to shade the porch, I would finally be able to rest. Ethan was a good boy then. He used to sit on the counter while I cooked, swinging his legs. When I grow up, I'm going to buy you a big house. Mom, he would say, his eyes wide and serious. You won't have to work 2 jobs forever. I believed him. I believed in his goodness the way I believed the sun would rise in the east. But then he met Lauren. Lauren Whitaker came into our lives like a cold draft. She was beautiful in a sharp, manicured way, always dressed in clothes that looked expensive, but somehow lacked character. Her parents, the Whitakers, were the same. They drove leased luxury cars and spoke loudly about their vacations. But they never seemed to reach for the check at dinner. I remember the first time Lauren really looked at my house. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I had just finished painting the living room a soft sage green. She walked in, did not take off her shoes, and scanned the walls. It's very cozy, she said, the paws doing all the heavy lifting. But don't you worry about the neighborhood values. I heard the crime rate is ticking up on this side of town. My parents would never settle for this zip code. It is safe enough for me, I had replied, keeping my voice steady. Over the years, the comments became a steady erosion. She asked about my retirement funds. She asked if the house was in a trust. She asked what my plan was if I got sick. I thought she was just being practical, but now I see she was taking inventory. The change in Ethan happened slowly, then all at once. He started looking tired, his temper shortening like a burning fuse. I found out later he had gotten involved in a safe investment opportunity that Lauren's father had recommended. It was some scheme involving real estate in Florida that never materialized. Ethan lost thousands, but instead of cutting ties, he clung harder to the Whitakers, desperate to fix the mess before I found out. I suspected something was wrong when he asked to borrow $500 for car repairs but could not look me in the face. I sat him down at the kitchen table, the very table I had refinished with 3 coats of varnish. "Ethan," I said gently, "if you are in trouble, we should talk to a financial advisor. There is a man at the bank who—" He slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups jump. "Why do you always have to bring in outsiders?" he shouted, his face twisting in a way that looked so much like Lauren's. "Why can't you just trust family? You always think you know better. It is exhausting." I pulled back, stunned. My son had never raised his voice at me. It was not his anger, it was his desperation. He sounded like a man who was being strangled. The last memory I have before the stroke was a quiet Tuesday evening. Ethan had come over alone. He stood on the back porch, looking at the maple tree, which was now towering over the roof. "Mom?" he asked, not looking at me. "Have you ever thought about selling? The market is high right now. You could cash out. Give us all a fresh start. This is my home." "Ethan," I had said, "I am not going anywhere." He didn't argue. He just nodded, a strange, defeated look in his eyes. Now, lying in the hospital while strangers lived in my sanctuary. I realized that conversation had not been a suggestion. It had been a final check to see if I would go quietly. Since I said no, they decided to wait until I could not speak at all. They thought the coma was the end of the story. They were about to learn it was just the prologue. The darkness was not silent. It was a crowded room where I was gagged and bound, forced to listen to the dismantling of my life, for weeks, or perhaps months. I floated in a black ocean, unable to twitch a finger or lift an eyelid. The doctors spoke of me in the past tense, their voices clinical and detached as they discussed swelling and brain activity. But the voices that cut the deepest belonged to the people who were supposed to love me. I heard Ethan first. He sounded exhausted, his voice thick with what I initially thought was grief. "She looks so small," he whispered. "I don't know what to do." "Lauren." The doctor said the chances are slim. Then Lauren spoke. Her voice did not tremble. It was sharp, clear, and terrifyingly pragmatic, like she was negotiating a contract rather than standing over a dying woman. "Ethan, look at me," she said. "We cannot keep burning money on extra care if she's not going to wake up. We have to be realistic. If she doesn't make it, we need a survival plan." The phrase survival plan echoed in my head like a hammer striking metal. I wanted to scream that I was right there, that I was fighting to surface, but the darkness held me down. A few days later, the conversation shifted. I could hear the rustle of coats and the squeak of shoes on the hospital floor. "My parents are out of options." "Ethan?" Lauren hissed. "They cannot stay in that motel another week. It is draining us." "But—" "It is Mom's house," Ethan said. His protest was weak, a paper shield against a hurricane. "I can't just move people in while she is lying here." "An empty house is useless," Lauren snapped. "It is just bricks and wood. Your mother isn't using it. My parents need a roof. Do you want them on the street? Is that the kind of man you are?" I strained against the paralysis, willing my heart rate to spike, willing the machines to beep, to signal my objection. Nothing happened. I was a statue. Then came the moment that turned my confusion into ice-cold clarity. It was a phone call. Lauren was standing close to the bed. I could hear the static from the receiver. "Yes, I have the papers," she said into the phone. "I talked to Ron Haskins at the notary office. He said he understands the urgency. He said, well, he said he just needs a signature that looks close enough. He won't ask too many questions. Ron Haskins. I memorized the name. I etched it into the black walls of my mind. They were not just borrowing my home. They were stealing it. Time blurred, and then new voices entered the room. Older voices, Lauren's parents. Oh, Ethan. Thank you, a woman's voice said, sounding relieved. It is a lovely place. A bit dated, perhaps. We should really paint over that kitchen. A nice beige would clean it up. Make it look fresh. Yeah, a male voice added. Get rid of that old smell. They were talking about erasing me. My sage green walls. My kitchen. My scent. They were scrubbing Marjorie Caldwell out of existence while I lay helpless a few feet away. The final blow came from a stranger. I heard 2 nurses checking my vitals, thinking I was nothing more than organic matter. It is a shame. One whispered. The son called administration today. They asked to cancel the advanced physical therapy sessions. Why the other asked. She has insurance. They said the copay was too high. The first nurse replied. Said they wanted to stick to the bare minimum required. The realization washed over me, colder than the grave. They did not just think I would die, they were banking on it. Or worse, they wanted me to survive as an invalid, too broken to fight back. In the silence of that room, my panic calcified into something harder. I stopped trying to move my limbs. Instead, I focused entirely on my memory. I recorded every sentence, every tone, every admission. They thought they were speaking into a void, but they were speaking into a recorder that would never run out of tape. I was not going to die. I was going to wake up, and I was going to play it all back. The discharge process was a blur of paperwork that I signed with a shaky hand. But the most important meeting happened in a small, windowless office on the first floor. The hospital social worker introduced me to Tricia Keene, a legal aid attorney who looked like she ran on caffeine and sheer willpower. Tricia was small, sharp, and wasted absolutely no time on sympathy. She opened her laptop and started typing before I had even settled into the chair. Let's get the facts straight. Mrs. Caldwell, Tricia said, her eyes scanning the screen. You own the property at 429 Elm Street. The deed is in your name. There is no record of a transfer of title. That is the good news. The bad news is that your son claims he has legal authority. If he is not lying, there has to be a paper trail. We spent the next 2 hours digging through county records online. My head throbbed, but the adrenaline kept me focused. Then Tricia stopped typing. She turned the screen toward me. Here it is, she said, her voice dropping an octave. A general power of attorney, filed 3 months ago. I leaned in. The document authorized Ethan Caldwell to manage all my financial and property affairs. At the bottom was a signature that spelled Marjorie Caldwell. Next to it was the stamp of a notary public, Ron Haskins. That is not my signature, I said, my voice trembling with rage. Look at the loops. It is too smooth. I have not signed my name like that since I was in my 30s. And look at the date. August 14th. Tricia nodded, pulling up my medical file on her tablet. August 14th. You were intubated in the ICU. You could not have lifted a pen, let alone driven to a notary office. This is a forgery, and it is a sloppy one. Since I had no home to return to, I took a cab to the one place I knew was safe. Dolores Finch lived 3 houses down from me. She was over 70, walked with a cane, and missed absolutely nothing that happened in the neighborhood. When she opened the door, she did not gasp. She just pulled me into a hug that smelled of lavender and old paper. "I knew you would wake up," Dolores said fiercely. "I told that daughter-in-law of yours that you were too stubborn to die. She didn't like that one bit." Over tea, Dolores filled in the gaps that the legal documents could not. "They changed the locks 2 days after you went under," Dolores said, pouring more hot water. "I saw a locksmith's van. Then came the furniture truck. They took out your oak dresser, the one your father made, and loaded it up. I asked Ethan where it was going, and he just mumbled something about storage. But I saw a sold sticker on the side of it. Marjorie. They were not storing it. They were liquidating you." That evening, I stood at Dolores's living room window. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see my house. The lights were on in the living room. I saw a silhouette move past the window, a man's shape, likely Lauren's father. It felt visceral and violating, like seeing a stranger wearing my clothes. That was my sanctuary. That was where I had cried over my divorce, where I had raised my boy, where I had planned to grow old. Now, it was just a host for parasites. I turned away from the window and called Tricia. "We have them," I said. "The dates do not match. The signature is fake." "What is the next step?" Tricia was silent for a moment on the other end of the line. "Marjorie, listen to me carefully," Tricia said, her tone grave. "We can file for an emergency eviction order based on fraud. With the medical records proving you were incapacitated, a judge will sign off on it immediately. But you need to understand the collateral damage. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. If we submit this evidence to the court, it becomes a criminal matter. Forgery of a legal document is a felony. If Ethan or Lauren is the one who signed your name, or if they knowingly used a forged document, they could be arrested." I looked back at the glowing yellow windows of my stolen house. I thought about the oak dresser. I thought about the words survival plan. "Do it," I said. "File the papers." Ethan knocked on Dolores's front door 3 hours after I had called him. When he stepped into the small, floral-papered hallway, he looked like a man who had been running from a fire only to find himself at the edge of a cliff. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt was untucked, and he carried an air of frantic exhaustion that filled the small room. He did not look like a villain. He looked like a cornered animal. I sat in Dolores's armchair, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I did not stand up to greet him. "Mom?" Ethan started, pacing the short length of the rug. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tic he had carried since childhood. "You have to stop this. You are overreacting. Do you have any idea what kind of pressure I was under? The doctors were saying you might never wake up. The bills were coming in. Thousands of dollars a week. And Lauren. She was a wreck. Her parents lost their condo. They had nowhere to go, and the house was just sitting there empty. I let him talk. I let the excuses spill out of him like dirty water. He was trying to build a wall of logic to hide his guilt behind. He talked about duty, about crisis management, about how hard it was for him to see me in that bed. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was low, steady, and devoid of the warmth he was used to. "Ethan," I said, locking eyes with him. "Answer one question for me. When did you sign the power of attorney? Where were you? And who was the witness?" Ethan froze. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He blinked rapidly, looking at the floor, then at the wall, anywhere but at me. Well, it was back in August, he stammered, the confidence draining out of his posture. It was necessary paperwork. We had to handle your accounts. That is not what I asked. I cut in, my voice sharpening. I asked where you were. Did you go to an office? Did you raise your right hand and swear an oath before a notary named Ron Haskins? He swallowed hard. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush him. Lauren. She handled the logistics, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. She brought the papers home one night. She said she had a friend who could fast-track it so we wouldn't get bogged down in red tape. I signed where she put the sticky note. I trusted her. Mum, she is my wife. He looked at the man who used to be my little boy, the one who promised to buy me a big house. I felt something inside me break, but it was a clean break. You signed a legal document claiming I gave you permission to take my life away. Ethan, I said. And you did it while sitting at your kitchen table, not in front of a notary. That makes the document a lie, and it makes your control over my house illegal. Ethan flinched. So here is your choice. I continued, leaning forward. You have 24 hours. You go to that house, and you tell the Whitakers to pack their bags. If they are not out by tomorrow evening, I will let the court handle it. And when the sheriff executes an eviction order, it is not going to be quiet. Ethan's face turned a blotchy red. The panic was turning into defensive anger. Are you serious? He shouted, his voice rising. You would humiliate them like that, Mom? If I kick them out? Lauren will never forgive me. Do you want me to lose my wife? Is that what you want? I looked at the man who used to be my little boy, the one who promised to buy me a big house. I felt something inside me break, but it was a clean break. I lost my son the moment you decided I was just a piece of paperwork to be filed away. I said coldly, I am not trying to ruin your marriage. Ethan? You did that yourself when you let your wife turn you into a thief. Thief? He sputtered. I didn't steal anything. I was taking care of things. I have a lawyer. Ethan, I said, dropping the final weight. Her name is Trisha Keene. We have reviewed the county records. We know the signature is forged. We know the dates don't match my medical charts. If I file this motion, it triggers a criminal investigation. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse. Do you understand that people go to prison for this? The colour drained from his face completely. He looked sick. For the first time, the reality of the situation pierced through his denial. He wasn't just in trouble with his mother. He was in trouble with the law. He backed away toward the door, shaking his head as if he could shake off the truth. You wouldn't, he whispered. Then he turned and fled, the door slamming shut behind him. I sat there in the silence, listening to the sound of his car engine revving and fading into the distance. Dolores walked in from the kitchen, placing a fresh cup of tea on the table next to me. She didn't say anything. She just rested a hand on my shoulder. He chose the easy way, I said to her, my voice finally trembling. That is what hurts. Dolores. Not the house, not the furniture. It is that when it came down to protecting me or pleasing her. He didn't even hesitate. He chose the path of least resistance. And now he is going to learn that the easy way is usually the most expensive way to live. The next few days felt less like real life and more like I was a detective in my own murder investigation. Trisha turned Dolores's dining room table into a war room, covering the lace tablecloth with stacks of printed emails, hospital logs, and bank statements. We were not just looking for a smoking gun. We were building an entire arsenal. Tricia was relentless. She pulled the visitor logs from the hospital and matched them against the date on the power of attorney. "Look at this," Tricia said, pointing a manicured nail at the timeline. "On the day you supposedly signed the document, you were undergoing a scan. You were not even in your room for 3 hours. And look at the visitor log. Ethan did not sign in until 6 in the evening. Lauren did not come in at all." She then pulled up the physical therapy records. I felt a cold knot in my stomach as I read the notes. Family requested reduction in frequency due to financial constraints. They had slashed my recovery plan to save money for themselves. "We have the medical proof," Tricia said, her voice tight with satisfaction. "Now we need the scene of the crime." Dolores came through with the kind of neighborhood surveillance that the FBI would envy. She remembered the exact date the moving truck had arrived because it was the same day her cat had escaped. She went next door to the Millers, who had a security camera pointed at the street. We sat around the laptop, watching the grainy footage. A white van pulled up to my driveway. I saw Lauren step out. She was not crying or looking distressed. She was pointing at my front door, directing a locksmith. Then, a man in a blue windbreaker handed a clipboard to someone standing on my porch. "That is Robert," I said, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "That is Lauren's father." Tricia paused the video and zoomed in. It was blurry, but clear enough to see Robert Whittaker signing the invoice. He signed for the lock change, Tricia noted, scribbling furiously on her legal pad. He authorized work on a property he has no title to. That is trespassing and criminal mischief, at the very least. And here is the kicker on your notary, Ron Haskins. I did some digging. He has 2 prior complaints against his license for notarizing documents without the signatory present. He runs a sloppy shop. He is the guy you go to when you need to cut corners. Later that night, I went through the few personal effects Dolores had managed to salvage from my house before the locks were changed. I was looking for my old red leather notebook, the one where I kept my passwords, birth dates, and account numbers. It was gone. They didn't just take the house. I realized, turning to Dolores, they took my identity. That book is missing. That is how they got into the utility accounts. That is how they knew which insurance policies to call. My phone rang. It was Ethan. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Mum, please." Ethan sounded desperate, his voice cracking. "We need to talk. Can I come over? Just me. I want to explain." I gripped the phone tight, my knuckles turning white. "No," I said firmly. "We are done with kitchen table talks. Ethan, if you want to speak to me, it will be in Tricia's office with a court reporter present. Anything you say to me from now on goes on the record. You are treating me like a criminal." He cried out. "Then stop acting like an accomplice." I shot back and hung up. 5 minutes later, a text message popped up. It was from Lauren. "You are destroying your son's family over a house you can't even live in alone. Keep pushing, and you will die lonely." I did not reply. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Tricia with a simple note. "Add this to the pile." Tricia filed the petition for an emergency eviction order the next morning. The court accepted the urgency of the fraud allegations and set a hearing date for the following week. I felt a surge of triumph. We had them cornered. The evidence was overwhelming. But I had underestimated Lauren Whittaker. Just as we were preparing to serve the papers, Tricia called me. Her voice was no longer confident. It was urgent. "Marjorie, we have a problem," Tricia said. "A sheriff's deputy just dropped off a notice at my office. Lauren has filed a counter-motion. She isn't just fighting the eviction. She has filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship over you." I stood frozen in Dolores's hallway. "Guardianship," I whispered. "She is claiming the stroke has left you mentally incompetent," Tricia explained, her tone grim. "She claims your anger is a symptom of dementia and that you are a danger to yourself. If the judge grants this, she gets legal control over everything, including your lawsuit against her. The legal system is a beast that moves slowly until it decides to swallow you whole, and then it moves with terrifying speed." Lauren had filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship. She was not just trying to keep my house. She was trying to become me. The motion claimed that my stroke had left me with significant cognitive deficits, and that my recent erratic behavior, which was just me hiring a lawyer, proved I lacked the capacity to manage my own affairs. If the judge signed that paper, Lauren would have the legal right to dismiss Tricia, sell my house, and put me in a state-funded facility. Tricia slapped the file onto the desk, her face pale with fury. "They made a mistake," Tricia said, her finger stabbing at a signature on the medical affidavit. "This assessment claims you were evaluated by a Dr. Aris Thorne on Tuesday." "Marjorie, did you see a new doctor on Tuesday, no?" I said, shaking my head. "I was with Dolores all day watching soap operas." "Exactly," Tricia replied, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I looked up Dr. Thorne. He is an orthopedist in New Jersey. He has never practiced neurology in this state. They didn't just exaggerate. They forged a medical opinion. They are desperate. Despite the fraud, the court ordered an immediate competency evaluation to be safe. I sat in a sterile room with a court-appointed psychologist, a young man who looked at me with pity. It was the most humiliating hour of my life. I had to prove I was a person. "Can you tell me what year it is?" "Mrs. Caldwell," he asked. "It is 2025. I answered, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking under the table. "I am 58 years old. My social security number ends in 4590, and I know exactly who is trying to steal my life." I passed with flying colors. In the hallway outside the courtroom, I saw them. Ethan looked grey, like he hadn't slept in a week. Lauren was whispering to him, shoving a clipboard into his chest. "Just sign the extension." "Ethan," I heard her hiss. "If we show the judge we have a lease agreement, it complicates the eviction." I watched my son hold the pen. He looked up and saw me. For a second, I wanted to run to him, to snatch the pen away and save him from himself, but I stood rooted to the spot. If he signed that, he was documenting a lie. He was cementing his role as a co-conspirator. "Don't do it. Ethan?" I whispered to myself. He hesitated, his hand trembling, but Lauren grabbed his wrist and guided the pen down. He signed. My heart broke, not for me, but for the jail cell he was building for himself. I slumped against the wall, burying my face in my hands. "I can't do this. Tricia," I choked out. "He is my son. I am destroying him." Tricia grabbed my shoulders and turned me to face her. "You are not destroying him, Marjorie," she said firmly. "He is a grown man making bad choices. You are fighting for your right to live. If you stop now, you are telling the world that it is okay to throw you in the trash. Do you accept that I straightened my back?" "No." The judge threw out the guardianship petition an hour later. The medical signature discrepancy was enough to cast doubt on everything Lauren had filed. Lauren did not scream. She did not cry. She just stared at me with eyes like shark glass, cold and dead. I thought we had won a moment of peace, but I was wrong. A cornered animal does not surrender. It bites. That night, my phone rang at 11 o'clock. It was Dolores. "Marjorie, wake up," she said, her voice breathless. "There is a truck at your house. A big rental van. They are backing it right up to the garage. They aren't sleeping. They are loading." The rage that hit me was different this time. It wasn't hot. It was ice. They knew they were going to lose the eviction hearing. So they were stripping the carcass. They were going to leave me with nothing but bare walls. "I am coming over," I said. "I will call the police." Dolores said, "No." I commanded, "Not yet. Call the sheriff's department and ask for Deputy Miller. Tell him there is a burglary in progress at 429 Elm Street, but I want to be there when he arrives." I took a cab to my own house. I stood on the sidewalk in the dark, watching the shadows move across my front lawn. I could hear the scrape of wood against pavement. I heard the heavy thud of a box being thrown into a truck bed. It sounded like they were breaking bones. I walked up the driveway. The motion sensor light flickered on, illuminating the scene. Ethan was dragging my armchair, the one I read to him in when he was a baby, toward the van. Lauren was carrying a stack of my silverware. They froze. "Put it down," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the night air like a gunshot. "Mom." "Go away," Ethan shouted, panic rising in his voice. We are just moving our stuff out. That is my chair." "Ethan," I said, "and that is my silver. It is community property," Lauren shrieked, dropping the pretense of civility. "We improved this house. We have a right to compensation." I pulled my phone out and held it up. "I am not here to argue," I said. "I am just here to open the door for the sheriff." Blue lights flooded the street, silently turning the maple tree from red to blue. Red to blue. 2 cruisers pulled up to the curb. I watched the blood drain from Lauren's face. I did not feel happy. I did not feel relieved. I felt the grim satisfaction of a surgeon cutting out a tumor that had almost killed the patient. "This ends tonight," I said. The sheriff did not knock politely. He hammered on the front door with a heavy fist, the sound echoing through the neighborhood like a gavel strike. I stood behind him, flanked by Tricia and 2 deputies. When the door finally opened, Lauren was standing there. She was wearing a white cashmere sweater and a smile that looked like it had been glued onto her face. Her eyes, however, were darting back and forth, scanning the uniforms, the guns, and finally, me. "Officer, surely there is a misunderstanding," Lauren said, her voice pitched high and tight. "We are just looking after the place, taking care of things while Marjorie recovers. We have a court order for immediate eviction." "Ma'am," the sheriff said, stepping past her into the foyer. "You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises." Behind Lauren, her parents, Robert and Elaine, appeared. They did not look like squatters. They looked like offended aristocracy. But the moment they saw the deputies moving toward the living room, their posture collapsed. They switched tactics instantly, dissolving into a puddle of victimhood. "We are old people," Elaine wailed, clutching a throw pillow that I did not recognize. "We have nowhere to go. You cannot just throw us on the street." Ethan said we could stay here as long as we needed. "This is elder abuse," Robert shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "We are the victims." Here I walked past them. I did not look at their faces. I looked at my house. It was unrecognizable. My sage green walls, which I had painted by hand, were now a sterile, soulless beige. The hallway, once lined with framed photos of Ethan's childhood and my parents', was bare. The hooks had been pulled out and the holes spackled over. They hadn't just moved in, they had erased me. I walked to the back window. My breath hitched in my throat. My maple tree, the one I had planted to mark my independence, had been butchered. The lower branches were hacked off, leaving jagged, weeping wounds in the bark. "They cut it," I whispered, feeling a phantom pain in my own chest. It was blocking the natural light. Lauren snapped. Following me, we were improving the property value. As the deputies began supervising the packing, one of them bumped into a cardboard box that Robert had been trying to slide behind the sofa. The tape gave way, and the contents spilled out across the floor. It wasn't clothes, it was paper. I stared down at the pile. There, crumpled up like trash, was the original deed to my house. Next to it were my insurance policies and my birth certificate. They had stuffed my entire legal identity into a box to be discarded. "Photograph it," I said to Tricia, my voice shaking with a cold rage. Photograph it all. They weren't house-sitting. They were hiding evidence. The front door flew open, and Ethan burst in. He was out of breath, his tie crooked, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at the deputies, then at the chaos of open suitcases and boxes. "What is happening?" Ethan stammered. "Mum, tell them to stop. You can't do this." Lauren spun around and marched up to him. She didn't look like a loving wife anymore. She looked like a cornered rat baring its teeth. "Do something, you idiot," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Fix this. You told me you could handle her." Ethan froze. He looked at Lauren, then at me, and for the first time, the fog seemed to lift. He realized she wasn't worried about him or his mother. She was furious that her free ride was over. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Time is up," the sheriff announced, checking his watch. "Anything not out the door in 2 minutes stays here." Robert tried to argue, planting his feet. "We need more time. My back is bad." "Move it, or we move you," the deputy said, placing a hand on his belt. The walk of shame was public and brutal. The entire neighborhood was watching from their porches. Dolores was standing in her driveway, arms crossed, watching like a sentinel. Robert and Elaine dragged their rolling suitcases down the driveway, cursing under their breath. Lauren walked ahead of them, head high, refusing to look at anyone, typing furiously on her phone. Ethan trailed behind them, carrying a box of kitchen appliances, looking like a ghost. When the last car door slammed and the taillights faded around the corner, the silence that fell over the house was heavy. The sheriff nodded to me and closed the front door. I stood in the center of the living room. It smelled of unfamiliar perfume and cheap paint. It did not smell like home. I felt a profound sense of loss, not for the objects, but for the sanctity of the space. Tricia walked up beside me and closed her folder with a sharp snap. "You got the house back, Marjorie," she said quietly. "But don't get comfortable yet. Getting them out was just the clean-up. The next step is the kill shot." The silence in my house was different now. It was not peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I sat at my kitchen table, which was now just a folding card table I had borrowed from Dolores. listening to Tricia explain how the trap was snapping shut. We got lucky. Marjorie, Tricia said, placing a file folder on the plastic surface. The state investigators have been watching Ron Haskins for 6 months. He is not just a sloppy notary, he is running a document mill. To save his own skin, he turned over his digital logs. We have the metadata. She tapped a printed screenshot. This proves the power of attorney document was created on a computer registered to Lauren Whitaker, Tricia continued, her voice devoid of emotion. And the emails show she coordinated the timestamp with Haskins. But here is the problem for your son. His signature is on the bottom line. Legally, he is the one who executed the fraud. Lauren just handed him the pen. If he claims he didn't know what he was signing, he is admitting to negligence. If he admits he knew, he is admitting to a felony. I stared at the paper. My son was the weapon, but Lauren was the hand that aimed him. I called Ethan. I told him to come alone, or not to come at all. When he arrived, he looked like a man whose soul had been scooped out. He sat across from me at the card table, wringing his hands. Tricia has the evidence. Ethan, I said quietly. We know Lauren typed the papers. We know she set up the notary. But your name is on the line. You have a choice right now. You sign a sworn affidavit stating you were coerced and you cooperate with the fraud investigation. Or you stand next to her when the prosecutor files charges. Ethan put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. I didn't know it was illegal. Mum. He sobbed, the sound raw and pathetic. I was drowning. Lauren's parents didn't just lose their condo. They were evicted. Robert made some bad loans. They owe over $50,000 to people you don't want to owe money to. They needed an asset. They needed your house to show the creditors they had collateral. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. So I wasn't a mother to you. I was collateral. I thought you were dying. Ethan cried out, looking up with red, wet eyes. Lauren said. She said if you died, the house would go to probate and the bank would take it anyway. She said we had to secure it. I was just trying to save the inheritance. You were not saving an inheritance, I said, my voice cutting like glass. You were feeding me to the wolves to save your in-laws. Ethan signed the affidavit. He wept as he did it. But he chose self-preservation, just as he had done when he gave away my keys. 2 hours after Ethan left, a car pulled into the driveway. It was Lauren. She walked to the door, not with shame, but with a terrifying determination. I let her in. She stood in the empty living room, looking at the beige walls she had authorized. You are a selfish woman. Marjorie, she said. It was not an insult. She said it like it was a diagnosis. You live here all alone in a 3-bedroom house while my parents are sleeping in a Motel 6. Do you feel good about that? I feel good about owning my own home. I replied, leaning against the doorframe. Lauren sighed, checking her nails. Look, let's be adults. Ethan is a mess. My parents are destitute. Drop the lawsuit. We will pay you rent. A small amount. Whatever we can afford. You can live in the back room. My parents will take the master. It is a fair trade for us taking care of you. I looked at her, amazed by the audacity. She was trying to negotiate a surrender in the middle of her own defeat. I decided to push, just to see how deep the rot went. You moved so fast, I said, keeping my face neutral. How did you get the papers ready so quickly after I fell? Lauren laughed, a short, sharp sound. Oh, Marjorie, don't be naive. I had those papers drafted 3 months before your stroke. We were just waiting for the right time to make you sign them. Your aneurysm just expedited the process. The air left the room. She had not just seized an opportunity. She had been circling me like a vulture waiting for a pulse to stop. "Get out," I said. "Think about the deal." "Marjorie," she said, turning to leave. "It is better than dying alone." As the door clicked shut, Tricia walked out from the kitchen, holding her phone. The recording app was still running. State law permits recording a conversation if one party consents. Tricia said, her eyes gleaming, "You consented." And she just admitted to premeditated fraud. That wasn't a negotiation. That was a confession. I looked at the door where Lauren had stood. I felt no pity. I felt no hesitation. "Do not offer them a plea deal," I told Tricia. "I want them to stand in front of a judge and explain why they thought my life was theirs to take." The hearing for the preliminary fraud charges was set for 2 days later. I dressed in my best navy suit. I did not look like a victim. I did not look like an invalid. I walked into the courthouse with the calm of a woman who had already died once and found that death had nothing on a mother's rage. Lauren was sitting at the defense table. She looked up, expecting to see fear. Instead, she saw me. And for the first time, she looked away. The courtroom was cold, but the heat coming from the defense table was palpable. This was not a long, drawn-out trial. It was a hearing to determine the validity of the legal documents. But Tricia had turned it into an autopsy of their greed. When Ron Haskins' name was called, he did not even look up from his hands. The judge reviewed the hospital logs, which clearly showed that at the exact moment I was allegedly signing a complex legal document in a notary office across town. I was actually lying unconscious in a scanner while doctors tried to determine if my brain was bleeding. Then came the texts. Tricia projected the messages between Lauren and Ethan onto the screen. "She is not waking up. Ethan, stop stalling. Get the signature done so we can secure the asset." Lauren shifted in her seat, her face turning a blotchy red. But the final nail in the coffin did not come from Lauren or Ethan. It came from Robert Whittaker. Tricia produced a document that made the courtroom go silent. "Your Honor," Tricia said, her voice ringing clear. "This is a utility application filed 2 weeks ago. In it, Robert Whittaker declares himself the primary owner of the residence at 429 Elm Street to qualify for a senior citizen discount on the water bill. They did not just stay there as guests. They impersonated the homeowner to save $40 a month. The judge looked over his glasses at Robert, who shrank into his collar. It was such a petty, stupid crime, but it proved intent. They had buried me before I was even dead. The judge turned his attention to Ethan. My son stood up. He looked like a man who had not slept in a year. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, "you have heard the evidence. Did you knowingly sign a fraudulent document?" Ethan looked at Lauren. She was glaring at him, her eyes wide with a silent threat. Then he looked at me. I did not glare. I just waited. Ethan started, his voice cracking. I was wrong. I was scared. And I was weak. And I know who led me there. Lauren slammed her hand on the table. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, forgetting where she was. "You are ruining his life. You are heartless. Marjorie, you are cruel to your own flesh and blood." The room went deadly quiet. I stood up slowly. "Cruelty is taking a sick woman's home and calling it family," I said. My voice was not loud, but it filled every corner of the room. The gavel came down hard. The judge declared the power of attorney void ab initio, meaning it never legally existed. He issued a temporary restraining order against Lauren and her parents, barring them from coming within 500 feet of my property. He then ordered the transcript of the hearing be sent to the district attorney's office for review regarding criminal fraud charges. But I wasn't finished. Before we left the courtroom, I sat down with Tricia and signed a new document in front of the court clerk. I granted medical and financial power of attorney to a professional fiduciary, a neutral third party Tricia had recommended. Ethan, I said, handing him a copy, you will never have to make a hard decision for me again. You are relieved of that burden forever. Then came the final blow. I filed the paperwork to place my house into a living trust. I looked at Lauren one last time. The house is now in a trust. I told them, if I die, or if I become incapacitated again, the property is to be liquidated immediately. 100% of the proceeds will go to the National Stroke Association to fund rehabilitation for people who have no one to speak for them. No family member will ever touch a dime of that equity. Lauren looked as if I had slapped her. The asset she had schemed for, the nest egg she had tried to steal, was gone. I went home. The house was quiet. I spent the afternoon changing the locks myself, the screwdriver feeling heavy but good in my hand. I took the old photo of me and Ethan back when he was 5, sitting on my lap, and hung it back on the wall. I did not hate him. I loved him enough to stop enabling him. As the sun went down, I saw a car pull up. Ethan got out. He walked up the driveway and stood on the porch. He raised his hand to knock, then stopped. Through the window, he saw me standing there. He looked at the door, then at his hand, and he dropped it. He turned around and walked back to his car. I closed the blinds and locked the deadbolt. I did not do it for revenge. I did it because I had finally learned the hardest lesson of motherhood sometimes: to love yourself. You have to teach your children that they are not entitled to your life. If he wanted to walk into my world again, he would have to learn to respect the boundaries I had just built. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a hard journey, but I'm glad I could share it with you. I'd love to know where you folks are tuning in from, so please drop a comment down below and say hello. Let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash that hype button to help this video reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.